What happens when a billionaire CEO goes undercover in his own luxury hotel and is treated like a nobody? Damian Blackwood built an empire, but when he steps into Imperial Luxe Miami, he uncovers corruption, discrimination, and a failing service culture. Instead of walking away, he takes matters into his own hands. Employees are exposed, the guilty are fired, and the hotel is shut down for a full-scale purge. This is the story of power, justice, and rebuilding a legacy. Welcome to H2 Black Thread, where we reveal the truth behind the elite. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the glittering skyline of Miami, a city of wealth, luxury, and excess. As the neon lights flickered on, bathing the streets in a soft electric glow, one of the most prestigious hotels in the city stood tall, a beacon of opulence and status. Imperial Luxe Miami was the jewel of the Imperial Hotels Group, a five-star paradise catering to the world's elite. Celebrities, executives, and socialites frequented its lavish suites, expecting world-class service. But recently, something had gone wrong. Reports of guest mistreatment, discrimination, and poor service had started pouring into Imperial Hotels' corporate offices. The complaints weren't minor, they were serious. Guests felt ignored, disrespected, and even unwelcome. Some claimed their reservations mysteriously disappeared. Others said they were denied service outright for reasons that didn't seem legitimate. At first, the hotel's general manager, Martin Grant, brushed off the concerns, labeling them isolated incidents. But when the complaints kept piling up, someone at the top had to take notice. That someone was Damian Blackwood. Few men in the world commanded as much respect and fear as Damian Blackwood. A self-made billionaire, he had built Imperial Hotels from nothing, expanding from a single boutique resort into a global empire of five-star luxury accommodations. His name was synonymous with perfection, his brand a symbol of flawless service and elite hospitality. He did not tolerate incompetence, and he certainly did not tolerate mistreatment of guests. So when reports suggested that Imperial Luxe Miami, one of his flagship hotels, was failing, Damian didn't rely on corporate investigations or second-hand reports. He went there himself. Damian was no stranger to undercover investigations. Over the years, he had conducted several anonymous visits to his own hotels, ensuring that employees treated every guest with dignity, whether they looked wealthy or not. This time, he took extra precautions. No limousine pickup. Instead, he arrived in a simple rental sedan. No tailored designer suit. Instead, he wore a plain navy blazer over a black t-shirt and dark jeans. No Imperial Hotels executive privileges. Instead, he had booked a standard single room under the alias Daniel Brooks, just another guest. To any uninformed staff member, Damian would look like a mid-level businessman, perhaps someone in Miami for a short stay, nothing special. Which was exactly what he wanted. As he pulled up to the hotel's grand entrance, he took a deep breath. Tonight, he was not Damian Blackwood, the billionaire. Tonight, he was just another customer. Damian stepped out of the rental car and handed his keys to the valet, a young man in an Imperial Luxe Miami uniform. The valet barely looked at him, muttering a half-hearted welcome to Imperial Luxe before grabbing the keys and moving on. Red flag number 1. A five-star establishment should ensure that every guest, no matter who they were, was treated with respect from the moment they arrived. Damian shook it off and stepped into the hotel lobby. He had been here before, but never like this. The grandeur was undeniable. The space exuded wealth and sophistication. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting golden light over polished marble floors. A sprawling bar lined with imported spirits stretched along the far end of the room, and elegant seating areas were occupied by well-dressed guests engaged in quiet conversation. To the casual observer, this was luxury. But Damien, he saw beyond the illusion. He noticed the small details that revealed the true state of the hotel. The receptionist at the front desk was scrolling through her phone, not paying attention to arriving guests. A well-dressed black couple near the concierge desk looked visibly upset, while a hotel employee avoided eye contact and dismissed them. A server at the lobby bar ignored a middle-aged man in an off-brand suit, while eagerly serving a younger man in designer clothing. Damien's jaw tightened. He hadn't even checked in yet, and he was already witnessing systemic negligence and bias. Damien strode to the front desk, stopping directly in front of a blonde receptionist with heavy makeup and an expression of pure boredom. Her name tag read Lauren Harris. She didn't look up. Instead, she continued tapping on her phone, a smirk playing on her lips. Damien waited. A full 10 seconds passed before he cleared his throat. Lauren sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes before finally looking up. "Yeah," she said. "No welcome to Imperial Lux, no how may I assist you." Just yeah, Damien felt a flicker of irritation, but he remained calm. "I have a reservation," he said evenly. "Under Daniel Brooks." Lauren sighed again, turning to her computer with all the enthusiasm of a bored teenager forced to do homework. She typed lazily, then, without even looking at the screen, she shook her head. "Nope," she said, "don't see it." Damien arched a brow. She hadn't even checked properly. "I have my confirmation right here," he said, pulling out his phone. Lauren barely glanced at the screen before shrugging. "The system doesn't lie," she said flatly. "Maybe you booked the wrong hotel." Damien exhaled slowly, keeping his composure. But now, he was done playing nice. As Lauren went back to scrolling through her phone, Damien silently pulled out his secondary device, the one that gave him full access to Imperial Hotel's internal booking system. He tapped into the database. There it was, his reservation. Still active, still confirmed. But then his eyes narrowed. There was an additional log entry, reservation manually deleted, and the name next to the action, Lauren Harris. Damien's jaw tightened. So this wasn't an accident, this wasn't a system error, this was deliberate. Lauren had taken one look at him, his casual clothing, his unassuming presence, and decided he wasn't worth serving. She had deleted his reservation on purpose. She had no idea she had just made the worst mistake of her career. Damien slowly looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. He wasn't just checking into a hotel anymore. He was about to burn it to the ground. Damien Blackwood stood at the front desk of Imperial Lux Miami, the crown jewel of his hospitality empire. Yet, at that moment, he wasn't a billionaire CEO. He was just another guest. A guest who had just been lied to, ignored and dismissed by a receptionist who had no idea she was speaking to the owner of the entire empire. Lauren Harris, the arrogant front desk agent, had taken one look at him, his casual attire, his unassuming demeanor, and decided he wasn't worth her time. She had deleted his reservation, deliberately, and now she was about to pay for that mistake. Lauren clicked her nails against the desk, pretending to be busy as she scrolled through her phone. Damien, still holding up his confirmation email, remained calm and measured. "Lauren," he said smoothly, "are you absolutely sure you don't see my reservation?" Lauren let out a long, exaggerated sigh, tilting her head slightly as if he were the most inconvenient part of her night. "Sir," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I already checked. If it's not in the system, then it doesn't exist." Damien's grip on his phone tightened slightly, but his face remained unreadable. "Is that so?" She rolled her eyes and turned back to her computer, typing with the enthusiasm of a bored teenager forced to do homework. After a few seconds of tapping, she barely glanced at the screen before shaking her head again. Nope, nothing here. Damien exhaled slowly. She was lying. He knew she was lying, and he had proof. Still, instead of confronting her immediately, he decided to see how far she would take this. All right, he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. Let's say I did make a mistake. Since I'm already here, can I just book another room? Lauren let out another dramatic sigh, shaking her head. We're fully booked, she said, barely concealing her smirk. Damien arched a brow. Fully booked? Really? A quick glance around the lobby told him otherwise. A steady stream of guests was still checking in, some visibly receiving key cards and heading to their rooms, but he played along. Every room, he asked. Not a single one available. Nope, Lauren said, popping the P. He nodded slowly, allowing a small, amused smirk to tug at the corner of his lips. Fascinating. Still keeping his expression neutral, Damien casually pulled out his secondary phone, the one with full administrative access to Imperial Hotel's booking system. With a few quick taps, he navigated to the real-time room availability for Imperial Lux Miami. And there it was. Plenty of available rooms. But that wasn't the worst part. His original reservation was still in the system, or rather it had been until it was manually deleted. By Lauren Harris. The evidence was right in front of him. His booking confirmation. His reservation history. The audit trail proving she had willingly removed his name from the system. Lauren hadn't just lied to him. She had tried to erase him, and she still thought she could get away with it. Not tonight. Damien placed his phone on the counter and turned it around, displaying the log entry. Lauren's name was right there. Her face lost all color. Why? Damien said, his voice still calm. Does this say you manually deleted my reservation? Lauren's lips parted slightly, her mind racing for an excuse. I didn't. Don't, Damien cut her off, his voice turning ice cold. Lauren flinched. The employees nearby noticed the shift. A bellboy nearby froze mid-step, pretending to adjust his tie as he eavesdropped. Even the concierge snuck a glance toward the front desk. Damien leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for only her to hear. You knew my reservation was in the system, he said slowly. You looked me in the face and told me it wasn't, and then you deleted it. Lauren's fingers trembled against the keyboard. I don't know how that happened, Damien's eyes narrowed. Let's stop pretending, he said, his tone razor sharp. You saw me, made a judgment, and decided I wasn't worth serving, and instead of just ignoring me, you went out of your way to erase me. Lauren opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Damien exhaled sharply, then straightened. All right, he said. Let's see what happens next. He turned to the nearest employee, a younger desk agent who had been watching the exchange in stunned silence. You, Damien said. Give me a room. The young man stiffened. Me, he stammered. Yes, Damien said, locking eyes with him. The young clerk hesitated, clearly torn between following Lauren's lead or obeying the suddenly very intimidating guest standing in front of him. After a second, he turned to his computer and began typing. Lauren sputtered in protest. Hey, he doesn't have a... But the system didn't lie. The young clerk found a room instantly. Well, he said nervously, room 412. Damien smiled. Then he glanced at Lauren. Oh, so we're not fully booked. Lauren's face burned red. Enjoy your stay, the young clerk said quickly, sliding the key card across the desk. Damien reached for it, but then paused. Actually, he said, glancing at the screen. What's the original room Lauren had assigned to me? The clerk hesitated before reading the screen. Room 139. Damien smirked. He knew that room, near the service elevator. Next to the garbage disposal, overlooking the loading dock. It was the worst room in the hotel, petty, deliberate, typical. Lauren swallowed hard. Damien slowly picked up the key card for room 412, tapping it against the counter before looking back at her. "Next time," he said, voice calm but dangerous, "be careful who you disrespect." Then, with a slow, deliberate stride, he turned and walked away. But this wasn't over. Not even close. The elevator doors slid shut behind Damian Blackwood as he ascended to his newly assigned room. His grip on the key card tightened, but his face remained unreadable. Lauren Harris had made a fatal mistake. She thought she was dealing with an unimportant guest, just another face in the sea of travelers. She had lied, erased his reservation, and then deliberately tried to humiliate him by giving him the worst room in the hotel. But Damian wasn't just any guest. He was the owner of the entire Imperial Hotel's empire. And now, he was about to tear apart the corruption rotting inside his own establishment. The moment he entered room 412, Damian didn't bother to take in his surroundings. He didn't need to. Instead, he pulled out his secondary phone, the one that gave him full, unrestricted access to Imperial Hotel's internal network. Within seconds, he bypassed the standard guest interface and logged directly into the staff operations system. What he found made his blood boil. Lauren Harris hadn't just deleted his reservation. She had done this dozens of times before. Her name appeared repeatedly in the system's audit logs, attached to an alarming pattern of behavior, erasing confirmed bookings for guests who didn't look the part. Assigning subpar rooms to customers she deemed unworthy of better accommodations. Fabricating hotel policies to turn guests away, particularly those from certain demographics. Damian scrolled further, his jaw tightening. Multiple guest complaints had been filed against her, each detailing incidents of rudeness, sabotage, and outright discrimination. And not a single one had been acted upon. Every complaint had either been dismissed or marked as resolved, without any real resolution. His fingers curled into fists. This wasn't just one bad employee. This was systemic negligence, and it went far beyond Lauren. The general manager, Martin Grant, had been sweeping these complaints under the rug, and now Damian was going to make them both answer for it. Damian didn't wait. He turned on his heel and stormed back down to the lobby. The tension in his chest grew tighter with each step, but outwardly he remained composed, calculated, deadly. As soon as the elevator doors opened, he strode toward the front desk, his presence commanding enough that even guests nearby took notice. Lauren was still there, still smug, still scrolling through her phone as if she owned the place. She hadn't even noticed him approaching, not until he was standing directly in front of her. She glanced up, annoyed at first, then froze. Something in his demeanor had changed. There was no more polite guest in front of her, no more easy mark to dismiss. There was something in his eyes, something cold, something powerful, that made her breath hitch. Lauren blinked. Lauren, Damian said, his voice low and sharp as a blade. "How long have you been working here?" Lauren hesitated, the sudden shift in conversation catching her off guard. 2 years, she stammered. 2 years, Damian repeated, nodding slightly. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "And in that time, how many guest reservations have you deleted?" Lauren's face drained of color. The employees nearby, desk agents, concierges, even the bellboy who had been pretending not to eavesdrop, all froze. What are you talking about?" she sputtered. Damian tilted his phone toward her, displaying the log entries. Her name listed next to multiple manually deleted reservations. Her actions laid out in cold, undeniable data. "I have records," Damian continued, "of every time you erased a guest's booking, every time you manipulated the system to deny service, every time you assigned someone a garbage-tier room because you didn't think they belonged here." Lauren's breathing grew erratic. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean what?" Damian cut her off. "You didn't mean to erase my reservation." A murmur rippled through the lobby. Some guests had started to pay close attention. A well-dressed businessman sipping his cocktail at the lobby bar turned to listen. Two women sitting in the lounge paused their conversation. The air grew thick with tension. Lauren was visibly shaking now. I thought it was a system glitch," she said weakly. Damien let out a sharp laugh. "Right," he said. "And the other 50-plus reservations you erased. That was a glitch too?" Lauren had no answer. Damien's voice turned colder. "You tried to erase me," he said. "Just like you've erased countless other paying guests, and I have a feeling you only got away with it because your manager lets this slide." Lauren blinked rapidly, a bead of sweat forming at her temple. This wasn't just a complaint. This was a reckoning. And then Damien said the words that made her legs nearly buckle. "Let's ask him, shall we?" He turned to a nearby employee. "Bring me Martin Grant," he ordered. The young employee hesitated, then quickly bolted toward the manager's office. Lauren looked like she wanted to run. Martin Grant arrived less than 2 minutes later, a man in his mid-50s, his posture stiff with corporate arrogance. He had the look of someone who had been comfortably coasting through his position for far too long. The moment he saw Damien standing at the desk, his expression shifted from irritation to panic. "Mr. Blackwood." The second his real name left Martin's mouth, the entire front desk staff went rigid. Lauren let out a small, strangled gasp, because now the truth came crashing down. The man she had disrespected, lied to, and erased from the system wasn't just another guest. He was the owner of the entire hotel empire. Martin looked like he wanted to evaporate on the spot. "Sir, I—" "Shut up," Damien said coldly. The lobby fell silent. "You let this happen," Damien continued, stepping closer. "You let her get away with this, again, and again, and again." Martin fidgeted. I wasn't aware of the extent." Damien tilted his phone screen toward him. "I have records," he said. "Records that say otherwise." Martin went completely pale. "I want an answer, Martin," Damien said. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Why is she still working here?" Martin couldn't answer. Damien's jaw tightened. "I'll make this easy for you," he said. "You're going to fire her right here, right now, in front of everyone." Martin's face crumbled. Lauren let out a strangled sound, and just like that the purge had begun. The lobby of Imperial Lux Miami had grown eerily silent. Every eye was on Damien Blackwood, the billionaire mogul who had just revealed his true identity. A few minutes ago, most of the staff thought he was just another guest. Now they were staring at the owner of the entire hotel empire, and he was furious. Martin Grant, the general manager, had just arrived, his face already drained of color. He stood next to Lauren Harris, the receptionist who had just been exposed for deleting guest reservations, manipulating the system and treating customers based on her personal biases. Damien had made his demand crystal clear: fire her. Right now, in front of everyone. And yet, Martin hesitated. That alone was a mistake. Martin cleared his throat, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. His corporate smile appeared, the one used to diffuse angry customers. "Mr. Blackwood," he started carefully, "I understand you're upset, and I assure you we take guest satisfaction very seriously." Damien said nothing. He simply stared, unblinking, unmoved. Martin shifted nervously and continued. "Perhaps we can take this discussion to my office and—" "No." The single word shattered the air like glass. Martin's breath hitched. Damien tilted his head slightly, his piercing gaze locked onto him. "You're going to fire her," he said evenly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Right here. Right now." Martin's eyes darted to Lauren, who looked like she was about to be sick. Damien could see the hesitation, the fear, the desperate need to protect his employee, and that pissed him off even more. Lauren didn't deserve protection. The paying customers she sabotaged deserved protection. The guests she humiliated and ignored deserved justice. And Martin, he was just as guilty for letting this happen. Martin swallowed hard, realizing he had no way out. He turned to Lauren. "Lauren," he said stiffly, "you're terminated, effective immediately." A stunned hush fell over the room. Some staff members looked relieved, others shocked. Lauren, however, looked like she had been stabbed in the chest. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide with pure disbelief. "And no, wait," she stammered. I didn't." Damien tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. "I have your deletion logs, Lauren," he said, his voice calm but merciless. "I have the guest complaints, I have everything." Lauren's breath hitched. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. For the first time in her career, she had no excuse, no way out. "Security," Damien called out. A tall security officer appeared almost instantly. "Escort her off the property," Damien ordered. Lauren's legs wobbled. "Please." But the guard didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, firmly gripping Lauren's arm. "No, this is a mistake," she shrieked. "Mr. Grant, please, I didn't mean to." Martin looked away. She had been his employee for 2 years. But now that Damien was watching, he didn't even acknowledge her. Lauren was disposable now, and that realization made her furious. She turned to Damien, her expression twisting into rage and humiliation. "You think you can just ruin my life like this?" she spat. "You're not even here most of the time. You don't know what it's like dealing with these." She stopped herself just in time, but Damien's expression darkened. "Oh. So that's what this was." Lauren had almost said it out loud, the truth behind her selective service policies, and that was all he needed to hear. "Get her out," he said flatly. The security guard nodded and dragged her toward the exit. Lauren thrashed, trying to shake him off, but it was pointless. Damien didn't watch her go. She was no longer worth his attention. His focus was now on Martin, and the real purge was about to begin. The lobby had grown deathly quiet. The front desk agents looked like they weren't even breathing. Martin adjusted his tie again, trying to maintain some sense of control. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, forcing a weak smile, "I assure you I had no idea Lauren was behaving this way. Stop." Martin froze. Damien slowly exhaled, his patience almost completely gone. "You've had multiple complaints about her, Martin," he said, "and you did nothing." Martin's mouth opened. You didn't train her," Damien cut him off. "You didn't fire her, you didn't even warn her." The older man shifted uncomfortably. I thought she just needed more guidance, more."
Damien let out a short, humorless laugh. "Guidance?" he repeated. "You don't guide people who actively erase guest reservations and mistreat paying customers." Martin had no response. Damien leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. "You?" "I knew this was happening," he said, his words sharp as a blade. "You let it happen. That makes you just as guilty." Martin visibly trembled. Sir, please," he said quietly, his voice now shaking. I have a family." Damien's expression didn't change. "You should have thought about them before you let your hotel turn into a disaster," he said coldly. Martin's eyes glistened with fear. Damien had seen this look before. A man who had been comfortable for too long, suddenly realizing his world was crumbling. "Security!" Damien called out again. The same guard who had removed Lauren reappeared instantly. "Escort Mr. Grant out as well," Damien said. Martin let out a strangled gasp. "Wait, what? You're—" "Done," Damien said simply. Please, Mr. Blackwood, Goodbye, Martin." The security officer gripped his arm. Martin let out a pitiful noise, his knees nearly buckling. "I can fix this. Just let me." Damien turned away. "I don't hire cowards to run my hotels," he said over his shoulder. Martin's pleas faded into nothing as he was dragged away. And just like that, the purge was complete. The employees left standing. In the lobby looked shell-shocked. Some were terrified, some looked relieved, because for the first time in years, the rot had been removed. Damien took one slow breath. Then he turned to the remaining staff. "This hotel has been failing for years," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "That ends tonight." The employees stiffened. "I don't tolerate mediocrity," he continued. "If you want to stay, you will meet my standards. If not, the door is right there." A few staff members exchanged nervous glances, but no one moved. Damien smirked. "Good," he said. "Now let's fix this mess." The tension in the Imperial Lux Miami lobby remained thick. Employees stood frozen in place, their eyes darting toward Damien Blackwood as if waiting for their own judgment day. Moments ago, they had watched their general manager, Martin Grant, and the corrupt receptionist, Lauren Harris, be publicly fired and escorted off the premises. Now, silence filled the space. But Damien wasn't done, not even close. He had purged the rot, but Imperial Lux Miami was still broken. And tonight he was going to fix it, permanently. Damien pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contact list before tapping a number. Within seconds, a woman's crisp voice answered. "Imperial Hotels Corporate. This is Sarah speaking." "This is Blackwood," Damien said, his voice firm. "Shut down Imperial Lux Miami. Effective immediately." A sharp intake of breath followed on the other end. "Sir, you heard me," Damien said. "No new check-ins, no new reservations. Any guests currently staying here will be compensated and rebooked at our sister properties." The employees nearby gasped, some of them visibly stiffened, their faces draining of color. A junior concierge clutched his tablet like it was a lifeline. A server from the lobby bar froze mid-step, his tray wobbling in his hands. The entire staff realized at that moment this wasn't a minor corporate audit. This was a full-scale takeover. "Understood, sir," Sarah responded. "How long will the closure last?" "As long as it takes," Damien said coldly. "I want a full inspection. Staff evaluations, guest experience reviews, financial audits, everything." Sarah hesitated. "Should I notify the board?" Damien smirked. "They'll find out soon enough." He ended the call, and just like that, Imperial Lux Miami ceased operations. A ripple of anxious murmurs spread through the remaining employees. Some staff immediately pulled out their phones, no doubt checking their work schedules, wondering if they still had jobs. Others exchanged nervous glances, realizing that if they had been part of the problem, they were about to be exposed. And then, one voice broke through the silence. "Wait!" a young desk agent stammered, his hands shaking. Is he the Damien Blackwood?" That was all it took. The panic spread like wildfire. A housekeeper gasped, covering her mouth in shock. A bartender dropped his towel, his hands suddenly clammy. Some employees looked outright terrified. Some looked relieved, because the good ones had been waiting for this moment. They had watched toxic co-workers get away with laziness, power-tripping, and mistreating guests for too long. They had seen management ignore the problems, too afraid to act. But now, the boss himself was here, and he was cleaning house. Damien turned to Cassandra, the young assistant manager who had stood silently through the night's chaos. "How many guests are currently staying in the hotel?" he asked. Cassandra, still looking a little shell-shocked, fumbled with her tablet. 237, sir," she managed. Damien nodded. "Every single one of them will be fully refunded, and I want all guests